major breakdown among the media elites. Think of what's been going on ever since that debate. It's been kind of a whirlwind, has it not? Since Thursday, the 27th, was it? I mean, it's been a couple of weeks. And we're now seeing in real time how messed up and contrived the media system really is, at least corporate media. I mean, they let it slip. They're letting it slip. I've told you all along, you know who I think is behind this operation? It really is some kind of takedown operation. I mean, think about it. Why would anybody in their right mind ever let that guy, Joe Biden, 81 years old, clearly suffering from something, get out there and do a debate? Why would you have that happen? And then you hole him up for 7 days over at Camp David, and that's the best you got? Like, why would you do it? Wouldn't you say, okay, you know, we're gonna hide him in the basement because we want to win? Well, somehow somebody made the brilliant decision, not so brilliant, obviously, from their campaign standpoint, to get him out there. It almost makes you wonder if it was a setup, because then it was fully on display for the whole world to see just exactly what kind of cognitive decline is really going on. The cognitive decline I've been telling you about for what, 3 years here straight. You couple that with a lack of ability to actually have any kind of real policy, and you get the disaster that is the you know what show we've had for the last 3.5 years. George Clooney finally waking up to that reality, putting it out in the New York Times, of course, just yesterday, coming out around 11 a.m., just a couple hours after Nancy Pelosi went on to Morning Joe and said, you know, he needs to make a decision. Well, Joe's made his decision. Dr. Jill made it for him, Nancy Pelosi. It's just maybe it's not the decision you want. Anyway, George Clooney putting this out there. Trust me, George Clooney is not an op-ed writer. Somebody else wrote it. In fact, when I looked at the language, it sounded an awful lot like David Axelrod. David Axelrod, we'll get to that in a second, having some very similar phraseology that this particular Clooney essay happened to have. But Mika Brzezinski let loose this morning on Morning Joe, and she basically said exactly what I've been telling you. There's no way in HELL that George Clooney wrote that thing and that he was put up to it by someone, maybe a couple of someones, and those someones come from the Obama administration. I'll let her take it away. Watch.
This wasn't George Clooney.
What do you mean?
It just wasn't. Come on.
Who do you think it was? Matt Damon?
It was not Matt Damon.
Who do you think it was?
It wasn't Julia Roberts either.
Who do you think it was? You can say the name. You won't melt. It's not Voldemort. Are you saying you think Barack Obama put him up to this?
I think that Barack Obama has a lot of influence, and I think that there's a lot there.
Come on, girl, spit it out. Spit it out. We know exactly who's behind this. It's exactly who I told you was behind it. He's got Jake Tapper's ear over at CNN, or he's peep stew, like David Plouffe, and who's the Rhodes guy, Ben Rhodes, remember? And a few others like Axelrod. But anyway, she couldn't spit it out. So Scarborough at some point kind of took over for her and admitted exactly how this is going down. Watch.
Viewers can follow what's going on behind the scenes is the Biden campaign and many Democratic officials do believe that Barack Obama is quietly working behind the scenes to orchestrate this.
Yeah, that's kind of what's going on. That's kind of how it's going down. Listen, I used to work in establishment media, including at Bloomberg, where a lot of the Obama people were in kind of tight. So I have no doubt that Axelrod and Plouffe and perhaps Rhodes are making some phone calls. On top of that, the new guy who's running CNN, guess where he came from, ladies and gentlemen? The New York Times. Guess who else came right out against President Biden? And by the way, I'm no fan. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I just think that this should have been done like a while ago. Not now at the 11th hour. After Americans voted for him, he is who you picked. Okay? It's who your party picked. I mean, you can't really undo that, even though you're trying. Anyway, it's very clear. I mean, they're all saying the same jazz. Here's David Axelrod, who ran Obama's campaign. Quick clip of him over on CNN, sounding very similar to George Clooney. Of course, this was a couple days earlier. Watch.
And so his psyche is that he can beat anybody and any long odds. What he can't beat is Father Time, and that's really the concern here.
Yeah, it's the concern. And they're just going to say that over and over and over again because they're trying to give him a graceful off-ramp, which he kind of needs, right? Let's be honest with each other. He couldn't get out the word Ukraine in his big speech yesterday. We're seeing how he's going to do in this other press conference coming up, the big boy press conference. I mean, seriously, they're actually using that terminology. The big boy press conference. That's how you know Dr. Jill's in charge, right? She treats him like a little teeny child. Anyway, that's Axelrod saying Father Time. And let's go over to the George Clooney op-ed. Yeah, that one. If we can zero in on some of the language, there's some stuff there that he says. Was he tired? Yes. A cold? Maybe. But our party leaders need to stop telling us that 51 million people didn't see what we just saw. We're also terrified by the prospect of a second Trump term that we've opted to ignore every warning sign. The George Stephanopoulos interview only reinforced what we saw the week before. As Democrats, we must collectively hold our breath or turn down the volume whenever we see the president, who we respect, walk off Air Force One or walk back to a mic to answer an unscripted question. And then he goes on, how you can't fight time. A line fed to him, I'm guessing, by Obama and Axelrod. So the irony of all this, ladies and gentlemen, is that they're all worked up saying, oh my gosh, Donald Trump's going to be the end of the system as we know it. You're not going to have a vote anymore. Your vote isn't going to matter anymore, which is a whole bunch of bogus you know what. However, look what they're doing in real time. Americans voted for him. Not that long ago. I mean, we've known this for at least 2.5 years. I've been playing you clip after clip after clip. Remember when he fell at the Air Force Academy graduation? You know how many times he's fallen up and down Air Force One. I mean, this is not new. Yet they're trying to pretend like it's brand new. You know why? One reason only. One reason only. Polls. You see, The Economist now has him winning. 74% chance, actually, of him winning. Joe Biden's approval rating at last check dropped to some 36%. No one's ever won an election at 36%. In fact, that would make him the weakest president ever in modern history. Most certainly, at least since they've been tracking this stuff. Poll after poll after poll. There's another one out of Wisconsin. You've got Minnesota. Heck, New York is in play, ladies and gentlemen. One of the bigwigs in the Democrat Party in New York just came out and said, my gosh, this is turning into a battleground state. They've had New York for decades. Minnesota hasn't voted Republican in decades for a president that's Republican. In fact, New Hampshire hasn't voted. I mean, Minnesota would be 1972. New Hampshire hasn't voted since the year 2000 for a Republican. And the new poll out of New Hampshire, St. Anne's College, is actually saying that Trump is now 2 points ahead. So Biden's behind everywhere. And granted, these are just polls, but I do have a tendency to believe that Donald Trump polls weaker than he actually performs at the ballot box. And the reason for that is people are kind of afraid. Well, now they're like looking at it and they're like, no, I'm really afraid. I'm really afraid of voting for Biden. Maybe I'll actually admit who I'm going to vote for in this case.